variety of people. That's the way the real world is. And the Western education just does not prepare students for that environment. They bring students up in this little artificial hothouse environment where they're always locked in a room with a bunch of people their own age and only one adult. But the real world is the other way around. There's very few kids compared to the larger number of adults. So we want to introduce Vedic cultural programs with the argument that this is going to strengthen the community values in the students and make them even more valuable to prospective employers in the future. And that's just our foot in the door. What we're really up to is we want to transform the university system from a degree mill churning out employable people with advanced degrees to a hub for local community organization. And the reason for that, as we went over several times, is that the modern corporatocracy has monetized and extracted the normal economic and social exchanges that occur in a healthy community and made them into profit centers. And in the process, they have encouraged us through advertising and education in so many ways to individuate, to separate from our communities. And so now instead of big extended families, if people have families at all, they have a nuclear type family. And so the whole system is designed for that. The housing, the education, the job scene, the finances, how much you pay for everything, fiscal policies, taxes, everything is designed for to encourage people to form these kind of nuclear families and then be dependent on corporations for everything. Food, shelter, transportation, employment, you name it. But what we want to do is form communities that take back the production of the necessities of life from the corporations and enrich the community with the tools required to produce those necessities. Right now, all the tools have been taken away and they're owned by corporations. I mean, they're even trying to patent the plants, for crying out loud. The vegetables and grains that people eat, they're trying to patent them, make them intellectual property, and then if you grow them, I mean, they even, it's so bad that when they do these tests of GMO crops, if the wind blows some of the pollen into the field on the other side of the road, and that farmer happens to grow some of the same strain of crops, they'll sue the farmer. They won't say the company's at fault for planting their GMO nonsense too close to the other guy's crops. They'll say the farmer is at fault and they sue him for copyright violations, which is a federal crime. So, I mean, this is getting crazy, people. We want out of here. We want to go back to the original community which is self-sufficient, self-reliant, where all the necessities of life, food, clothing, housing, transportation, everything is produced locally by community-owned tools, okay? Where the tools of production of the necessities of life are owned and shared by the community. And the community is also managed by consensus of all the members. There may be executives that perform specific tasks, but their powers are relatively limited. The real power belongs with the membership body as a whole. And if they don't like what the executives are doing, they can replace them by consensus. So we're working on this new type, well, it's actually a very old type of community, and which also embodies Vedic education and the Varnashram Dharma system. Which is all too complicated to explain right now because I'm just trying to summarize everything. Okay, so how are we going to make this work? Our proposal is that we raise as much cash as we can now and take that with us to India while the dollar is still strong. Okay, we anticipate that over the next year or two, there's going to be a further economic breakdown in Western world. And of course, this is going to affect India, but not as much as it's going to affect us here in the US, Canada, Europe, and like that. So what we propose is to raise as much capital as we can and invest it in India in the gold. We're watching the prices, and it looks like there's going to be a little dip in the gold price coming up in the next few months before the next leg down of the market and the dollar and all that. So this is Krishna's arrangement. The timing is perfect. Gold may go down to 940, 920, even 900, and if there's a big peak in the stock market, which it looks like they might be trying to engineer, we could get gold, fairly cheaply, and we just want to sit with that until we get a bottom in the real estate market. Now, farmland in India, a foreigner cannot buy farmland in India. You have to have a local trust, local ownership of farmland. So our proposal is, and we have to run this by lawyers and the whole thing, but we think it'll work. Our proposal is to establish a trust. Now, what is a trust? Basically, a trust is called a fiduciary. Fiduciary is an organization that takes responsibility for certain assets and how those assets are employed or engaged. So what we're proposing is that we establish a trust in India, and there may be things like it has to have 51% of the board of Indian residents or something, or Indian citizens. I don't know exactly what the criteria are. But basically, we would write the bylaws of the trust so that the investment can only be spent for sacred projects, according to our community plan, which, if you haven't read it by now, read it. Because it explains all this stuff in far more detail than I could ever get into here, including our unique economic principles and so on like that, that keep the wealth inside the community and keep corporations from ripping us off. So we would write the bylaws of the trust in such a way that the investment that people make would only be spent for buying land and building a self-sufficient community on that land at the time when the land prices are at a solid bottom. Right now they're still in a bubble, and there's been a little bit of a correction in India. We've been tracking this now. And it looks like the land prices are coming down towards a reasonable value, but they're not there yet. They're still, wildly inflated because of speculation. And we found out recently from your brother, right, that there's been a lot of this unsecured lending in India. And basically that's how you make a bubble. You give people capital who don't really deserve it or can't really pay it back. And then what happens is you temporarily increase the business, increase prices, and everything looks really good, but because those loans are actually bad loans, eventually they default and the whole thing collapses. That's what's happening in the US market. So it's starting to happen in India, but I don't think they've really gone off the cliff just yet. But just wait a little bit, because if they're doing that same nonsense there, they're going to have the same result. Anyway, so this is our strategy. We want to raise as much cash as possible, transfer it over to India into rupees. The exchange rate of dollars and rupees has been relatively constant for, I don't know, 10 years or more, right around 40, 50. Yeah, and I mean, compare that with Chile. The Chilean peso compared to the dollar, I mean, it's been all over the map. The dollar lost more than 20%, about 25%, just in the last 6 months compared to the Chilean peso, yeah. So, I was down there going to the ATM every day, getting these cheap dollars, And then, because when we came from Mexico to Chile, we lost a lot of money on the exchange rate at that time, because at that time the peso, or rather the dollar, was very expensive. It was 680 pesos. But then the dollar declined so much that when we changed our pesos back into dollars, we made it all back. We made about 20% on the exchange, even after all the fees and everything. So if we go into rupees now, I don't think we're going to really lose. And I found out, I verified, you have to change. When you transfer money, even if you, within the same bank, you can't keep your money in dollars.